right, today we are diving deep into a story that our sources claim is hidden away, tucked in the margins of ancient texts. It's a story about a world before our own, a world scarred by a rebellion that literally shook the foundations of creation. So the whole thing really kicks off with this huge question that honestly, archaeology still struggles with. If ancient humans were so primitive, how on earth did they build monuments with 1,000-ton stones? I mean, look at Baalbek in Lebanon. The official stories just don't quite add up, do they? Now, the sources we're digging into today, they offer up this really wild idea. They argue that these incredible structures, they are just feats of human engineering. Nope, there's something else entirely. The lingering evidence, what they call the fingerprints of a non-human intelligence. Okay, to get our heads around this, we've got to rewind the clock, way back to a time the texts only whisper about. The argument here is that when creation first kicked off, humanity, well, we weren't the first ones in the audience. And this verse from the book of Job, this is where it gets really interesting. Think about the timing. It's describing this cosmic audience watching the Earth's foundations being laid. But wait a minute, humanity hadn't even been created yet. So who exactly was watching? Well, the texts have a name for them, the Bens Ha-Elohim, or the sons of God. According to this interpretation, these weren't just angels. They were powerful celestial beings, the original spectators watching the whole drama of creation unfold long before humanity ever set foot on the stage. But, this is where the story takes a really dark turn. Some of these celestial guardians, the ones whose job it was to watch over humanity, they made a choice that would change the course of history forever. So, if you look at the ancient book of Enoch, it points to a group of 200 of these beings. They were known as the Watchers. They had this incredibly high station, but their focus, it started to drift away from the heavens and down toward the earth. And it wasn't an accident. The story lays out this very deliberate, four-step fall from grace. They started out as guardians, right? But then they became corrupted by their desire for human women. So they made a pact, an oath on Mount Hermon, to see this plan through. And together, they descended, totally abandoning their post. And they didn't come down empty-handed. Oh no. They brought gifts, forbidden knowledge. They taught humanity the art of war, sorcery, and enchantments. They even introduced cosmetics to stir up vanity, and they twisted the knowledge of the stars into something to be worshipped. And let's be super clear here. The sources are adamant that this was not progress. It wasn't enlightenment. They call it a spiritual and genetic infection that basically tore a massive wound in the very fabric of creation. So what happens when you have this forbidden union? Well, you get a monstrous consequence. It gave birth to a brand new, terrifying race that would go on to dominate the ancient world. And they were called the Nephilim. The name itself actually means the fallen ones, which is a direct nod to their hybrid origin, born from those fallen watchers. They were, in essence, a scar on creation, part celestial, part human, and totally unnatural. Yeah, so if you're picturing some kind of heroic demigod, you can just forget that. The Book of Enoch paints this absolutely horrific picture. These were savage, bloodthirsty giants, and their hunger was so huge they ate all the crops, all the animals, and when that wasn't enough, they started eating people. So you can just imagine, the whole world is just drowning in violence and chaos. The cries of humanity are rising to the heavens, and according to the story, it demanded a divine response, a response we all know as the Great Flood. And this slide, this really gets to the heart of the argument. You see, we usually think of the flood as a punishment for human sin, right? But these sources reframe it completely. They see it as a kind of divine surgery, a desperate, last-ditch effort to cleanse the planet of a genetic infection that was corrupting humanity's very DNA. So why Noah? What was so special about him? The text says he was perfect in his generations. And this interpretation argues that it wasn't just about him being a good guy. It was about his bloodline. His DNA was pure, untainted by this Nephilim corruption. So the Ark, it wasn't just a boat. It was a genetic lifeboat, preserving the uncorrupted human genome. But here's the twist. Even a global flood, as totally catastrophic as that is, apparently couldn't wipe the slate clean. According to these sources, the corruption, it found a way to survive. And it all hinges on this one little phrase from Genesis that's so easy to miss, and also afterward. This tiny phrase suggests that the giants, or at the very least their influence and their bloodline, somehow popped back up in the post-flood world. The problem wasn't solved. Which, of course, brings us right back to where we started. The sources point to all these ancient mysteries, the impossibly huge stones, the mind-boggling precision of the pyramids, the ancient kings of Sumer who lived for thousands of years, and they say, these are the fingerprints. This is the proof of this forbidden history. You see, from this point of view, these ancient ruins aren't just puzzles for us to solve. They're monuments telling a story. They're sermons of stone, bearing witness to a chapter of our history that was deliberately wiped from the books. And that really just leaves us with one last big question. Are these ancient accounts just incredible myths? Or, as these sources suggest, are they fragments of a forgotten memory? A warning about a rebellion whose echoes, maybe, we can still hear today.